Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks.
The area we were heading into, somewhere deep in Eastern Europe, had a grim reputation, mostly due to leftover radiation zones and whispered stories about strange creatures lurking beyond the tree lines. The reports we'd read were surreal. Survivors described animals that sounded more like something out of a horror flick than anything remotely real. Some even mentioned things that resembled wendigos or dogmen. Honestly, I didn't buy most of it. Trauma does strange things to the mind. Panic, adrenaline, darkness. They twist your memory. Maybe what they'd seen were just deformed wolves or irradiated bears. Still terrifying, but not monsters, right? There were 3 of us on this trip. Myself, Dmitri, and his girlfriend Anna. Dmitri grew up in this part of the world, born in a small village not far from where we were headed. He still spoke the language fluently, which gave me a weird kind of comfort, like we weren't walking blind into this place. Anna, a quiet girl with sharp eyes and a habit of chewing her nails, didn't talk much, but she always seemed to notice things the rest of us didn't. Everything had seemed completely normal at first. The flight was uneventful, customs barely. Glanced at our passports, no sign of the hellscape everyone had warned us about. As we drove out in our rented sedan, the first towns we passed looked almost peaceful, pastoral even. Farmhouses with faded red roofs stood among wheat fields, chickens picking in the dirt, cows grazing lazily. The earth here was dark, almost black, rich, fertile. It almost lulled me into forgetting why we were here. But then the scenery began to shift. The further we pushed into the radiation zone, the more the world seemed to decay around us. Houses sagged into themselves, paint peeling, roofs caved in. Fields that once grew golden crops now looked hollowed out, grey soil, brittle stalks. Not a soul in sight. Christ on a cracker, I muttered under my breath, not really expecting anyone to respond. This place looks like it's been through the end of the world. It has, Dmitri replied, his tone flat. Nuclear apocalypse. Silent, invisible, and merciless. Honestly, I think the biblical one would be less terrifying. At least that version has some hope, some redemption. This, he gestured out, the window. This is just rot. No rapture, no divine light. If another world war ever hits, you'll see cities turn to ash, buses flying through the air like toys, bodies raining from burning skies. Streets collapsing like paper. Millions buried before they even understand what happened. Well, that's a cheerful thought, Anna said dryly, her deep blue eyes scanning the tree line. I followed her gaze and caught a flicker, a pair of pale eyes darting through the brush. Small animal maybe, but something about the way it moved unsettled me. It didn't run. It disappeared, melted into the foliage before the sound of our engine caught up to it. How much farther? I asked, rubbing my temples. My stomach was turning in that familiar, queasy way it always did on winding roads. The narrow, snaking routes here reminded me of the hills in Northern California, except there was no ocean breeze or wine country at the end of this drive. Just ruins and radiation. Still a ways, Dmitri said, squinting ahead. This country's massive. Another 3, maybe 4 hours. Then we hike. Good thing we left before dawn, Anna said, yawning into her fist. She popped open, a neon green energy drink, some sketchy Russian knockoff that smelled like industrial cleaner. She sipped it like it was a fine Bordeaux. I leaned back against the seat, eyes locked on the thick forests rushing past on either side of the road. Tall black-barked trees, their branches clawing at the sky. The sun was rising now, just barely cresting the hills, throwing long shadows over the dead fields. Somewhere ahead in that dying land, something was waiting for us. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it already knew we were coming. The soil here, from the black earth of Ukraine, stained the sunrise with streaks of rust-red light, painting the sky like a wound. It was eerily beautiful, in a way that made your chest feel tight. So far the road had been easy, uneventful at least, except for my goddamn car sickness, which refused to let up. I popped a couple of dimenhydrinate pills and leaned my head back, wishing, not for the first time, that I'd smuggled a few THC gummies through customs. But cannabis here was strictly illegal. and I wasn't about to find myself locked in some concrete dungeon alongside lunatics like the 3 guys 1 hammer maniacs or the infamous chessboard killer. No thanks. Holy shit, would you look. Get that? Dimitri's voice cracked with awe, snapping me out of my haze just as he slammed on the brakes. The car lurched forward, and my stomach did a somersault. I sat up quickly, dizzy, and then froze at what I saw ahead. Lying right across the fractured asphalt was a massive dead bear. Its glassy eyes stared straight through us, vacant and unblinking. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. Dimitri's tattooed hand pointed toward it, almost reverently. Is that real? Anna asked quietly, squinting through the windshield. I didn't answer. I just shook my head slowly, mouth dry. The thing wasn't just dead. It was wrong. The longer I stared, the worse it got. The bear's forelimbs had additional paws, 7 claws jutting out of each like crooked knives. The paws looked like they'd grown from somewhere deep inside its flesh, each one misshapen and twitching slightly in the wind. Its hind legs were stunted, twisted inwards like broken tree roots. But the worst part was the thing growing out. Of its chest, it was an arm, pale, boneless, human-like, protruding grotesquely from its sternum like a tumor. The limp limb flopped and shivered with every gust of air blowing down the hills. It didn't belong, none of it did. Well, Dimitri said finally, his voice softer now, almost reverent. I guess the rumors weren't bullshit after all. His eyes sparkled with a strange kind of excitement, a childlike fascination. Can you imagine what else is crawling around in these forests? This is going to make one hell of a documentary. Anna nodded without looking away from the scene. She held her little digital camera tightly, the same one she'd been filming everything with since we arrived. She had dreams of making it big, going viral with some raw, haunting footage that would catapult her into the world of serious documentary work. I'm filming everything, she murmured, pushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear as she cracked the car door. Especially this. The door creaked open and the morning air poured in, warm, tinged with the smell of distant ash and soil. Dawn was fully breaking now, casting golden light over the hills. After a brief hesitation, I stepped out too. Dimitri stood beside Anna, his broad shoulders tense. He ran a hand over his freshly shaved head, eyes glued to the carcass. There was a tremble in his fingers, just enough to betray how uneasy he really was despite the bravado. Anna crouched down in front of the bear, camera lens zooming in, hands jittery with adrenaline. She was maybe 2 feet from it, scanning over the extra limbs, the unnatural flesh. I found myself wondering, how did it even die? There were no bullet holes, no bite marks, no gashes, just stillness. Then it happened. The bear blinked. Just once, a slow, unmistakable flick of its eyelid. I stumbled backward instinctively, my voice tearing from my throat in a raw, guttural shout. Back up! Move! Anna didn't react at first, still focused on the camera screen. Her lens was tracing over the bear's fingers when Dimitri lunged forward and grabbed her by the arm, his face a mask of sudden terror. He yanked her hard, dragging her back with a force I'd never seen in him before. She let out a surprised cry, stumbling awkwardly, her legs tangling beneath her. They hit the ground together in a heap, a blur of limbs and panic, just as the bear's body twitched again. The bear came to life in a jerking, bone-snapping motion, its spine cracking audibly as it twisted its grotesque head toward Dai. Us. Its eyes, black and oily, locked onto us with unnatural intent. Then it swiped a mutated paw exactly where Anna's face had been just a second before. I heard the sound, a sharp whip-crack of air as those extra claws sliced through nothing like switchblades. Its malformed snout jerked, teeth gnashing, flinging silver strings of saliva in every direction. With a guttural roar, it launched. Hit itself off the ground, impossibly fast for something so massive. Run! I shouted, my voice cracking. I turned instinctively, bolting for the car, but nearly crashed headfirst into something rushing out of the tree line. I froze. It looked like something from a fever dream, naked and bloated, flesh pale as candle. Wax. Its skin glistened in the early light. Its grotesque cheeks flushed pink. It had the vague features of a human twisted together with a pig. a sickening hybrid. And it moved upright, ran upright, like a person. Like it had learned from watching us. Its eyes were hellish, blood-red irises with dilated black pupils buzzing with excitement. Its twitching gaze locked onto Anna. Then it grinned. I'll never forget that grin. Wide, animalistic, lips peeling back to reveal stained yellow fangs. It sprinted toward her. Not even a chance to scream. Before either of us could react, the thing lunged forward and clamped its long black fingers around Anna's throat. I heard her squeal, high-pitched, like a rabbit caught in a snare. It snatched her like she weighed. Nothing, and dragged her off into the woods. Her legs flailed as she choked out a sob. I caught one last look and her arms reaching back toward us in terror before the thing vanished into the trees with her. Its hooves, God, it had hooves, pounded the forest floor faster than anything I'd ever seen. Leaves scattered, branches snapped, and then it was gone. "Hey! Hey!" Dmitri shouted, stumbling forward in a panic, but he barely got a step in before the bear, the goddamn mutant bear, slammed a clawed paw into his leg with a horrible thwack, sending him sprawling through the air like a rag doll. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the spot where Anna had disappeared. My brain refused to catch up. It was like reality had fractured, like I was watching some cruel, surreal film from inside my own skull. Then the bear reared up again, standing tall, its massive form blotting out the sunlight. It roared at us, jaws wide, spittle raining, down in thick ropes. The smell hit me like a truck, the stench of rot, infection, and roadkill baked under a hot sun. I gagged. I threw my hands up, bracing for a fatal blow, but it never came. Instead, it dropped back down on all fours, snorted, and sprinted into the trees, following the same direction as the pig thing. That horrible, limp extra arm swung from its chest like dead weight as it vanished into the underbrush. "What the fuck?" Dmitri rasped from the ground, his voice shaking. I snapped out of my daze and ran to him. He was clutching his leg, rocking back and forth. Blood soaked. Through his jeans, thick dark gouges cut deep into his thigh. The claw marks weren't just surface level, they looked surgical. "Jesus Christ," I gasped, crouching beside him. "You're bleeding bad. We need to get help." He looked up at me, his pupils unfocused, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. There was a weird smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, something dazed and hollow. "Help?" he echoed, almost laughing. "You think the police'll come out here? Into the zone? Into this?" He shook his head, the bitter smile fading. "They won't. They never do. No one goes past the checkpoint unless they've got a death wish." "But Anna," I started, voice cracking. "I know," he said, grabbing my arm. His grip was iron. "That's why we have to do it ourselves. But first aid kit, in the trunk. We patch me up, then we go after her." I hesitated, terrified, torn, but he was right. The phones were already dead out here, no signal, no reception. We were too deep into Chernobyl's cursed belly. It was just us, and whatever the hell those things were. And Anna, somewhere in that twisted forest, once was alone. Maybe still alive. Maybe. The old Soviet phone towers loomed in the distance, skeletal against the pale sky, long abandoned like everything. Else out here. No signal. No way to call for help. Nothing but the silence of dead land. After Dmitri disinfected and wrapped his leg with the supplies we had, he limped over to the trunk and began rummaging through it, tossing things out one by one. "God damn it," he muttered, frustrated. "There's nothing good here, a canister of bear mace, a few knives. What the hell are we going to do with this crap?" "We need an AK-47, not a kitchen drawer." I nodded grimly. "Too bad we're not in the States. Out here, the only guns you're going to find are still clutched in cold, dead hands. Probably Russian. Soldiers who didn't make it back." "Yeah, if only," he said, his voice trailing off. He handed me a large folding knife, the kind you'd use on a camping trip, not a rescue mission. One canister of bear mace, 3 knives, and a damn tire iron, he muttered, laying them out on the trunk like a pathetic display of survival gear. "We're not exactly an elite strike team." I stared at the woods, dark and endless. My stomach churned just looking at them. Everything in my body wanted to say no, but then I pictured Anna, screaming, hurt, maybe dying slowly in some festering hole, and I felt sick, weak. helpless. "Here," Dmitri said, pressing the black canister of bear mace into my hand. "Take this. I'll carry the tire iron and a blade." I held the mace like it was made of glass. "You ready for this?" he asked. "Absolutely not," I replied honestly. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would shatter my ribs. "I still think we should go for help. If we both die out there, no one's ever going to find Anna." He looked at me, cold, sharp. "The nearest town's 2 hours west. By the time we find someone, by the time they actually believe us, organize something, send anyone out here, she'll be gone. Trail cold. Maybe dead. You think cops are going to walk into a radioactive forest full of mutant freaks just on our word?" I didn't answer. "I couldn't. If you don't want to come," he started. "I'll come," I interrupted, jaw tight. "Just give me a second." Truth was, Dmitri wasn't just doing this because Anna was his girlfriend. He had his own scars, deep, twisted ones that never really healed. I remembered the night he told me, drunk and shaking, about his childhood in this country, about the neighbor, the lunatic who'd kidnapped him when he was 7. Kept him in a pit, outside, for weeks, just a hole in the ground, dirt and piss, stale crusts of bread thrown down into the filth every couple of days, sometimes moldy rice cakes. He said he'd wipe the shit off with his shirt and eat it anyway, because if he didn't, he'd die. That pit had nearly killed his body, but it had crushed his soul in ways no one could see. Maybe that's why he was so desperate now, not just to save Anna, but to keep someone else from going through what he had. We followed the trail into the woods side by side. The bear and that thing had left a path. Broken brush, snapped twigs, flattened ferns. Everything felt wrong. Quiet, almost staged. Like something was watching, or waiting. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting movement. But the forest was dead still. Even the birds were silent. After what felt like an hour, the trees suddenly opened up. Sunlight flooded in, almost blinding after the gloom. We stumbled out into a wide field, nestled deep in a valley surrounded by black forested hills. The wind picked up, rustling the tall yellow grass. It would have been beautiful, if not for what we saw next. I stopped cold. They were everywhere. Skeletons, sprawled across the field in a wide semicircle, like some kind of grotesque audience. Dozens, maybe more. Some had scraps of clothing still hanging on the bones. Others were half buried, chewed down to ivory stumps. But a few looked... Recent ligaments still clung to the yellowing ribs. Bits of rotting flesh hung like ribbons from arm bones. Scattered skulls grinned up at the sky with hollow sockets. Some were crushed. Others looked gnawed. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. It didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like a ritual site. A place where something had fed, again and again, and left the leftovers as a warning. "What the hell are we looking at?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the wind. Dmitri didn't answer. He just stared at the skeletal landscape, his jaw clenched tight, hands shaking at his sides. Furtively, glancing around the field littered with bones, I felt a sick twist of fear crawl up my spine. Some irrational corner of my brain whispered, what if they rise? What if they come after us? After everything we'd already seen in this waking nightmare, it didn't even sound that crazy anymore. "Dead bodies," Dmitri muttered under his breath, eyes scanning the grim scene. "Victims of the nuclear accident?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He shook his head slowly, jaw clenched. Then he pointed toward a few of the more recent corpses lying nearby. My stomach turned. Their throats, they looked torn open, bitten. The neck bones showed jagged impressions, deep and feral. Something had fed on them. One body close to us had its skeletal fingers tightly curled around an old glass bottle. There was a rolled-up piece of paper inside, sealed with a cork. I knelt down, hesitating a second before prying the brittle fingers open, each one snapping softly under pressure. I uncorked the bottle and slid the paper out. It was thick, rough, hand-pressed maybe, like something out of another era. The cursive handwriting flowed across the page like it had been scrawled with a quill dipped in ink. Frowning, I began to read aloud, confusion thick in my voice. Rules to survive in the hellskin nature preserve. 1. The cult known as the Golden Butchers has been abducting women, forcing them to breed with the pig creatures they worship. The offspring are treated as gods. If one of your group is taken, you'll find them in the living farm beyond the forest. 2. If you encounter Mr. Welcome, the giant pig god with eyes on his forehead, don't let him touch you. 3. The red snakes can only see movement. If you see one, stay perfectly still, don't even breathe. Breeding women with pig creatures, Dmitri said, his voice cracking. His face went pale, horror etched in every line. We need to find her, he said sharply, eyes wild. But where the hell do we start? I scanned the field again, hoping to spot anything. A trail, a footprint, something. But the entire area was trampled beyond recognition. Dozens, maybe hundreds of animal paths crisscrossed the tall grass. Some were beaten down to bare stone and black dirt. I don't know, I admitted, shaking my head. Then it came, a scream. Distant, thin, echoing down from the surrounding hills. It came from the left, and it sounded exactly like Anna, Dimitri's. Face changed. The fear vanished, replaced by something colder, focused, desperate. Without a word, he turned and ran, bolting toward the sound. Wait! Dmitri! I shouted, sprinting after him. His freshly shaved head glinted in the fading light as he vanished into the trees. I gripped the buck knife tighter in my hand, my knuckles going white from the pressure. I didn't even realize I was shaking. We wandered for hours, zigzagging, through the woods. The scream never came again, but we couldn't stop, we wouldn't. A narrow deer trail eventually opened up ahead, winding through brush and climbing rocky hills, beside a stream that cut through the terrain like a silver thread. We pushed forward, sweating, nerves frayed, minds racing. Neither of us talked much. The silence felt safer. A couple times I tried to get him to slow down, my breath ragged. Dmitri, I panted, how do you even know this is the right way? We've been on this damn trail for 5 hours. What if this is where the scream came from, he said weakly, eyes forward, shoulders tense. Where else would they take her? He didn't sound convinced, but what choice did we have? If they're moving fast with a hostage, Dmitri said between breaths, they'd stick to a trail. I wanted to argue. What if there are other trails? What if we're just going in circles? But I didn't. Truth was, we had no clue where we were anymore. We were just chasing echoes and hope. By the time we reached the peak of the mountain, my legs felt like lead. I pulled out the small portable Geiger counter we'd packed last minute, just in case. The display clicked rapidly, sharp and urgent. Radiation levels were spiking, far higher than normal background readings. How close do you think we are to the old nuclear plant? I asked quietly, scanning the distant horizon. No idea, Dmitri muttered, taking a long pull from his water bottle. Too damn close, that's for sure. I didn't say it out loud, but at some point, it had become too dangerous to keep going forward. That's when it happened. A shriek tore through the valley below us, unnatural and piercing. It sounded almost like an animal, but something about it was off, distorted, like it had been processed, through a broken speaker and amplified to ear-splitting hell. The sound echoed through the trees like a ripple of terror. A beat later, lower-pitched howls and growls answered from deep within the forest around us. Bears, wolves, predators. But they were too close. Much too close. Then, something shifted. To my left, the thick ferns beside me rustled violently. My pulse spiked. Just under the leaves I heard it. Whispers in Ukrainian. Hey. You. I jumped back, knife swinging in the direction of the voice, my hand trembling so hard the blade danced in the air. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Dmitri stepped in beside me, wild-eyed, gripping the tire iron like a baseball bat. Then, a small figure crawled out of the underbrush. It was a boy. He looked like a walking skeleton, barely more than skin and bone. Dirt and grime smeared his face, his eyes sunken and empty, like he'd seen things no child should ever witness. His black hair hung in greasy clumps, and his nose, twisted and bent, looked like it had been broken and reset more than once. He couldn't have been older than 10. But his body was so withered it was hard to tell. The rags he wore were tattered scraps, barely covering him. His frail form looked like it had stopped growing long ago. "Come out slowly," I said, my voice low, knife still raised. Dimitri's jaw tightened as he stared in disbelief. Jesus Christ! Don't kill me, the boy rasped, barely above a whisper. His voice was raw, cracking with every word. His accent was thick and guttural. Please, take me out of here. Who are you? Dimitri asked, lowering his weapon just slightly. He reached down, pulling the boy gently to his feet. The kid winced from the touch. My name is Philip, he said, wiping his nose with a dirty sleeve. I come from the farm. I didn't lower my knife. I watched every move he made. Bare mace still clutched in one hand, blade ready in the other. We'd seen too much to trust easily. My mom and dad brought me here, Philip continued, eyes darting toward the treetops. They were part of the Golden Butchers. But then they got sick, died from all the poison in the water. The food, Dimitri frowned. They brought you into this place? The boy nodded, tears finally breaking the dam in his eyes. They said it was a holy place, but it's not. It's not. It's a prison. He pointed toward the tallest peak in the distance, just barely visible through the haze. You can't see it from here, he whispered, but that's where it is. The farm. Dimitri crouched, bringing his eyes level with the boy's. Can you take us there? Philip hesitated, then slowly nodded. If you take me with you when you leave, he said softly, I'll show you the way. His voice broke into quiet sobs. But it's a horrible place. That's where Mr. Welcome lives. The name made my skin crawl. Still, we followed him, and surprisingly, he saved us hours of wandering. Philip moved through the forest like he'd lived in its shadows for years, taking hidden paths, spotting clues we'd never have noticed. A split branch, a knot in a tree, a faint print in the mud. He read them all like a map. Every step we took brought us closer to the living farm, and whatever nightmare waited there. Sometimes it was a small detail, an oddly bent branch, the glint of a rock shaped like an eye, or a sudden unnatural curve in the flow of a babbling brook that helped Philip guide us. To me, everything looked the same. Endless woods, suffocating. Silence, the creeping fear that we were being watched. There, Philip said at last, pointing through a break in the trees, and then we saw it, the farm. Perched atop the hill, where the forest had been stripped bare, it stood like a monument to madness, a twisted shrine. The trees stopped abruptly at its border, as if nature itself refused to grow any closer. The clearing was too perfect, too precise, unnaturally circular. At the center of it all loomed a structure that didn't belong in this world. It looked like it had once aspired to be a church. There was even a tower-like spire at the top, but any trace of sanctity had long since rotted away. Where a bell should have hung, there was a massive bloodshot eye. It stared outward, wild, unblinking, with a red iris like a raw piece of meat, and a dilated, crazed pupil that seemed to shift with its own will. It had no eyelids, just that obscene fleshy orb constantly rotating on its stalk. From the base of the eye, ghostly white tendrils spilled downward, like the filaments of a slime mold. They crawled across the black building beneath, merging into the structure itself. I didn't want to think about what they were. Nerves, veins, something worse. The building was massive. No windows. Nothing but jagged lines and steep, unforgiving angles. The whole thing was pitch black, like someone carved it out of a void and dropped it here. It reminded me of old Soviet brutalist architecture, but alive, breathing, because that's what hit me next. It was moving. The walls expanded and contracted subtly, rhythmically, like lungs struggling to inhale. And then the voice came. Welcome, it whispered, distorted and wet, like it was being exhaled through rotting vocal cords. Dimitri staggered back. What the hell is this? I couldn't answer. My tongue felt numb. Where's Anna? He asked, gripping Philip's arm a little, too tightly. Philip didn't meet his eyes. She's inside with the other breeders. The word hit like a hammer. Breeders, Dimitri echoed, his voice breaking. They keep them in cages, sometimes chained in the basement, Philip murmured. His eyes welled with tears. They wait until the ritual. I forced myself to speak. When is the ritual? Philip looked up at the sky, now burning orange with the dying sun. Sunset, he said quietly. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was minutes away. Dimitri jumped. To his feet. "Then we go in now." "Wait," I hissed. "Go in how? You gonna stab that nightmare church with your pocket knife?" He spun toward me, furious. "We can't just sit here." "We need a plan," I said, trying to stay calm despite the rising panic. "Maybe we can burn it. Draw them out." I didn't get to finish. The entire building let out a scream, an earth-shaking roar that rolled across the hills like thunder. It wasn't just sound, it vibrated. It was like standing inside a subwoofer tuned to hell. It wasn't alone. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of other cries answered from the forest. Some distant, others horrifyingly close. Then came the worst sound, yet something heavy snapping branches just a few feet behind us. I grabbed Dimitri's shoulder. "There's something back there." But it was too late. The trees cracked apart and something stepped into view. My legs locked. It looked like a pig, but mutated beyond recognition. It walked on all fours, its belly almost dragging the ground. The thing was huge, the size of a van. Its skin was pink and bloated, but covered in jagged needle-like teeth that grew right out of its flesh like tumors. Its whole body was bristling with them, like some grotesque porcupine. Its eyes, God help me, they were just like the one on the tower, blood red, round, dilated beyond sanity. And for one terrible second, those eyes locked onto us, each other. Their eyes locked, then narrowed with terror as the pig shrieked again, a guttural, violent roar that echoed like thunder through the trees. It lunged forward, hooves pounding the earth, its grotesque mouth snapping open and shut with a frenzy that sent cold dread down my spine. Its teeth, God, the teeth were wrong, grotesquely wrong. They weren't just in its gums anymore. Jagged, razor-like teeth jutted out from its tongue, its lips, even the inside of its cheeks. Hundreds of them. Different sizes, different shapes, chaotic and feral, like its flesh had sprouted them from madness itself. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Pip's arm, yanking him off the ground. The kid barely stumbled before his instincts kicked in. He didn't ask questions, just bolted beside me, heart pounding, breath sharp and ragged. We tore through the dense woods, bursting into a massive clearing. There it stood, the living farm. A looming monolith of blackened timber, twisted like it had grown from the earth itself. It had only one visible entrance, a massive barn door gaping open like a mouth in the dark. "Go, go," I cried, pointing toward it. I could already hear Dimitri's heavy boots thudding behind us, but worse than that, the beast's gallop. Closer, louder, violent. That sound, a rhythmic pulsing horror behind us. It wasn't just chasing us. It wanted to devour us. "In the barn," I yelled, not even thinking. There was no time to decide if it was safer inside. It was our only shot. I pushed myself harder, lungs burning, sprinting toward the dark barn door like it was the last place on earth. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We crashed through the threshold, slamming into the cool, musty dark inside. My shoulder hit the door and I shoved hard, trying to drag it closed. Dimitri grabbed the other side, his face soaked in sweat and panic. Pip clung to my leg, pushing with all the strength his tiny body could offer. The barn doors were massive, at least 2 stories tall. They groaned and creaked as we forced them shut, the rusted hinges screaming under the weight. Then, bam! Something hit the outside with the force of a freight train. The impact shook dust from the rafters, but the doors held. Without thinking, Dimitri and I snatched a heavy wooden board leaning against the wall and jammed it through the iron brackets, locking it shut from the inside. I could feel the wood tremble, slightly beneath my hands. We'd bought ourselves seconds, maybe minutes, only then did I realize how cold it was in there. Damp, heavy, like a cave that had been sealed for centuries. I turned slowly, eyes adjusting to the dark, and froze. I felt my throat tighten, a scream trying to claw its way out. The barn was filled, lined, with women, hundreds of them, stacked in vertical cells, built into the walls, like a grotesque beehive, each one crammed into a tiny compartment, barely large enough to sit, let alone stand. Most wore ragged clothes soaked in grime and dried blood. Their faces, pale, bruised, hollowed, stared blankly at us, the light in their eyes long gone. They were young, 20s, maybe 30s, but their expressions, their eyes looked ancient, weathered by something deeper than time. "What the hell is this place?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Along the back wall something moved, or at least I thought it did. My heart stopped. An enormous figure loomed there, a grotesque, mutated pig, but unlike anything we'd seen outside. It stood upright, crucified against the wall, arms outstretched like some twisted parody of a saint. Chains wrapped around its body, massive rusted links digging into its flesh. But what froze me in place were the eyes. Too many eyes. A dozen, maybe more, clustered across its swollen face, dotting its cheeks, forehead, even beneath its snout. All blood red, all unblinking. From the crown of its head, thin white filaments, like nerve tendrils, slithered upward, disappearing into the dark recesses of a rotting bell tower above. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. But it watched us, and then it spoke. "Welcome," it hissed, the voice soft but vibrating deep in my skull. "Welcome." The words didn't come from its mouth. They came from everywhere. From the walls, the floor, the air itself. Like the barn had been waiting to say it for years. Dmitri spun around, eyes wide, chest heaving. "Anna!" he shouted, panic cracking his voice. "Anna, where are you?" "There," was no answer. Just the silent gaze of those women and the stillness of that thing on the wall. "Dmitri?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's no one here, but don't scream," Pip said, barely audible. His voice was a trembling whisper. "Please, don't scream." But it was too late. Dmitri's cry echoed through the barn like a funeral bell. The last echoes of Dmitri's voice hadn't even faded before we heard the click, a sharp, mechanical sound beneath our feet. The barn floor split with a violent groan, and trapdoors sprung open across the blackened planks. From the darkness below, dozens of grotesque creatures began crawling out, hulking things, twisted mockeries of life. They weren't just pigs anymore. Some were bear-sized, their bodies swollen and malformed, fur patchy and blood-soaked. Others were hybrids, pig snouts on bear skulls, talons on hooved legs, eyes that pulsed and blinked in places where no eyes belonged. Their teeth gnashed with bloodthirsty fury, and the air filled with low, choking growls. "Shit! Back to the door!" Dmitri yelled, bolting. Together we sprinted back, hearts in our throats, and yanked the heavy board from the brackets. It hit the fleshy floor with a clatter, just as the creatures crept toward us in a slow, coordinated semicircle, encircling their prey. Then, wham! The barn doors burst open behind us. Night had fallen like a curtain of death, the shadows now thick and alive. But there were no pig beasts out there anymore, no, something worse was crawling out of the woods. I froze. From the tree line, snakes began to slither forward, blood-colored, mottled with black rot, thick as fuel tankers. They undulated silently, massive coils rippling through the grass, their forked tongues tasting the air. Each one was longer than a train car, and their sheer size made the earth tremble. They should have been loud, but they were unnervingly quiet, save for the occasional whisper of a hiss cutting through the dark. I stepped into the field beyond the barn, a no-man's land, caught between monstrosities. My heart twisted, sinking, into despair like lead. This was it. I looked down at Pip. He met my eyes, barely able to smile through the terror. His lip trembled. He was shaking, but he still smiled. Dmitri was beside me, panting. "I think we're—" His voice trailed off. He couldn't say it. I didn't need him to, but just then, a spark lit in my mind. "Wait. The rules," I muttered. I turned to them. "Don't move, don't breathe, just play dead. Like statues." "What?" Dmitri blinked at me, but Pip understood first. His eyes widened in realization. "Like before, the scarecrow rule." Dmitri got it too. He nodded once, and we all dropped into position. Still, silent. Not a breath. Behind us, the barn creatures crept ever closer, their claws clicking softly, their massive forms hunched in the shadows. I could feel their eyes, hunting, watching, waiting to see if we flinched. and in front the snakes slithered closer. I could see their eyes now, black slits, burning with cold, alien malice. The largest one paused inches from my face. Its jaw opened in slow, deliberate silence. 2 switchblade-sized fangs unfurled like scythes. A bead of venom dangled from the tip, thick, clear, and deadly. I clenched my jaw and shut my eyes. I didn't even breathe. And then, chaos. The snakes struck. I heard the impact before I saw anything, as wet, brutal cracking sounds. The squeals and howls of the mutated pigs and bears were almost human in agony. Bones snapped, flesh tore. The monsters shrieked and thrashed as the snakes lunged through them, tearing them apart like paper. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt eternal. Then, silence. A silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat thundering inside my skull. I don't know how long we stood there, frozen. Minutes? Hours? Then, a touch on my shoulder. I opened my eyes slowly. Dmitri stood there, staring out into the field. "They're gone," he whispered. "All of them. Except..." He turned his eyes back toward the barn. "Mr. Welcome." I nodded. Now. Or never. We moved quickly, slipping inside again. The air was heavy with rot and damp hay. The trapdoors were still open. Faint sounds, sobbing, rose from beneath the barn floor. Anna. Dmitri hesitated. He looked at me, jaw tight but afraid to speak. I nodded again. "Let's go." We descended. Below the barn was a basement, choked with darkness and dust. The air reeked of blood, metal and mildew. The floor was straw-covered, but the walls were lined with new instruments. I swallowed hard. Torture tools, hundreds of them. Rusted iron maidens, racks, saws, pliers, branding rods, braided whips stained with brown-red streaks. A brazen bull loomed in the corner, a grotesque silhouette. That made my stomach lurch. This wasn't just a barn, it was a chamber of ritualized agony. And in the corner, Anna. She was slumped against the wall, arms raised, wrists tied with thick rope to rusted rings hammered into the stone. Her legs were bound at the knees and ankles. Her face was swollen, pale, streaked with tears. Her lips parted in weak, shallow breaths. Dmitri let out a broken gasp and ran to her. Her eyes flickered open at the sound. Dmitri collapsed beside Anna, gripping her trembling hands. She was barely holding it together. A nervous wreck, eyes wide and unfocused, breath hitching in her throat. "Oh my God. You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please get me out of here, right now." "They're coming. The ritual, it's going to start soon." "Shh, we've got you," I murmured, already cutting through the ropes binding her wrists. Dmitri held her as I sliced the last knot at her ankles. Her legs buckled, but he steadied her. "We need to move quietly. Just follow me," I told her, trying to sound calm, though my pulse thundered in my ears. "We can still get out." As we climbed back up from the basement, the barn felt even more unnatural. The walls seemed to pulse, the air thick and alive with tension. Then, echoing from the rafters above, we heard the metallic, croaking voice again. "Welcome," that same twisted mantra looping again and again. But the moment all 4 of us reached the main floor, it changed. "Welcome." "Thieves," it hissed, its voice deepening into a guttural, wet gurgle filled with rage and malice. "That is my breeder," Mr. Welcome rumbled, voice vibrating the floor beneath us. "You will see what happens to thieves." I turned my head, slowly dreading what I'd see, and then he moved. The abomination inhaled deeply, his vast bloated body expanding with a sickening slurp, and with a roar that shook the walls. He tore the chains from the wall. Orange pus and clotted black blood poured from the torn flesh around the broken links. The barn itself seemed to react, the walls convulsing, breathing faster, vibrating like a living lung made of wood and sinew. Mr. Welcome rose to his full monstrous height, now walking upright like a pig-shaped god of death, limbs bulging with unnatural muscle, dozens of lidless, blood-red eyes locked onto us. As he moved, the tangled optic nerves connected to the bell tower snapped one by one with sharp cracks, like rubber bands. I could hear Anna's breathing turn into choked gasps beside me. And then Dmitri turned to me. There was something final in his eyes, something resigned. "Get her out," he said softly, voice trembling. "Just get her home, no matter what." "Dmitri, no." But he didn't wait. He ran forward, straight at Mr. Welcome, armed with nothing but a small, rusted knife. "No!" I shouted. The creature swung a black, sharpened hoof, but Dmitri ducked it, darting around its side and plunging the knife into its leg, over and over again. The blade probably felt like a mosquito bite to the behemoth, but it worked. It distracted him. Mr. Welcome turned abruptly, dropping to all fours and spinning to face Dmitri. With terrifying speed, he struck, his massive snout swinging like a wrecking ball, catching Dmitri full in the chest. I heard the crunch from across the room. Dmitri's body flew like a rag doll, slamming against the barn wall with a wet crack. He collapsed, twitching. Then the real horror began. His skin began to blacken, melting in places. Smoke curled from his pores, his eyes liquefied, dripping down his cheeks like wax. Dmitri!" Anna screamed. He screamed too, until his throat gave out, leaving only gurgled groans. He clawed toward us, his hands disintegrating into black rot. It was necrosis, but something beyond biological, like his very life was being undone. "Run!" I screamed, yanking Anna's hand. Philip was already ahead of us, his tiny legs pumping, as he sprinted toward the tree line. We tore after him, the ground shaking beneath our feet as Mr. Welcome gave chase, moving faster than anything that size should be able to. I knew we wouldn't outrun him. "Keep going," I shouted over my shoulder. "Don't look back, just run." Anna and Philip didn't stop, the raw instinct to survive taking over, but I stopped. I turned, because I couldn't let them die too. My eyes scanned the barn, searching, and then I saw it, the bear mace, still clipped to my pack from earlier. It wasn't much, but maybe it was enough. As Mr. Welcome galloped toward us on all fours, his face came closer, the dozen eyes gleaming in the moonlight. My hands trembled as I raised the mace and sprayed, a thick fog of chemical burn hitting him right in the face. He didn't stop. I had to dive aside to avoid being trampled. His body passed me in a roaring blur, the ground quaking beneath. His weight, then a scream, but not one of hunger or fury, pain, confusion, blinding agony. The monster thrashed wildly, his body twisting and bucking as the mace seared into his eyes. He screamed again, a high, unnatural bellow that echoed through the valley. He charged into the trees, tearing them apart, blinded and disoriented. He vanished into the night, still roaring. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, my lungs burning, following Anna and Philip until I saw the flicker of headlights. We made it back to the car. Later we told the police everything, about the barn, the hostages, the creatures, the rituals, but they said there was nothing there. No barn, no trapdoors, no chains, just forest and empty fields. No one ever found Dmitri's body either. Looking back, I've had time to think, and I think I finally understand why Chernobyl is still a restricted zone. It's not just the radiation, it's because some things hide in the dark, deep beneath the surface. Things that don't want to be seen, things that grow in rot and silence, things that still breathe.